right, welcome back to week 8 of DSR channel, and we are making skirmisher builds. And I got a request from Hallie to do Merry and Pippin from Lord of the Rings. I'm going to do one video each because it get long. And so Hallie, this one's for you. And we're going to start with Meriadoc Brandybuck, or Merry, which is that guy. I'm only going to take the build to level 4 because what I'm trying to do with this channel is really just lower the barrier to entry for people to get started with their build, right? But once you're 4 levels in, I feel like you're gonna have a pretty good idea of how your build works, how your character works, and so as the decisions come along for your build later, you're probably well equipped to handle that yourself, right? All right, and I've added one other color here. Red is where you've increased an ability score. Yellow, those yellow highlights, and let me know if this is too confusing. Yellow means that's not critical to the build. So you can swap around yellow things and you're not going to affect your build's survivability or their offense in any meaningful way. Okay? So I'm trying to give you flexibility. But if you don't really have like solid reasons to choose something else, just go with this. You'll be fine. Okay? So first up, Merry and Pippin. One of them is definitely a rogue, and I feel like the other one's a bard. And I think Pippin is the more entertaining one. So he's going to be the bard, and Merry is less of a jokester. He's still a jokester, but he's less. He's a little more serious. He understands people a little better, and so he's going to be the rogue. Okay, and I've chosen acrobatics because yeah, they're very agile. Investigation, perception, stealth, because you want those 3 for sure to be a good rogue, and you're going to fulfill the scout role for the party. And then sleight of hand we got from our background. So you want those 4 things to be a good scout, and we want to be a good scout as a rogue, right? If you show up in the party and you say you're playing a rogue, everybody's going to assume you're going to be good at the scout role. Okay, so if you're not, let them know. All right, hey, I'm a rogue, but I suck at scouting. I don't know why you've done that, but maybe that's what you want to build, and that's great. So just make sure everybody knows so they don't assume you're a scout. Okay, at level 1, we also get to choose expertise. So let's take perception and stealth, again, leaning into our scout role that we're going to be really good at. We also get to choose 2 weapon masteries. Just choose short sword, vex, and dagger for Nick. Those are great. I'm going to explain why and how those work together later. We're going to choose our species as halfling because these are hobbits. And the first version of D&D actually used hobbit as the species, not halfling. And then Tolkien's estate sent them a cease and desist. I don't think they actually sued them. I think they just sent them a cease and desist. And like Gary Gygax, there was like it was just him and like 2 other guys. I think they couldn't stand. They were not going to stand up to any kind of lawsuit, and they probably had a great deal of respect for Tolkien anyway. So like, sure, yep, we'll remove the word hobbit and we'll replace it with something else. And they created the word halfling to replace hobbit. Okay, so it's not that these 2 things are similar; they are the same. Okay. Now, some of the flavoring of halflings have maybe drifted a little bit over the years, and some of the art, especially getting into like 5th edition, has changed what the halflings look like. But originally, they were just big round belly types, just like the hobbits from Lord of the Rings. Okay, so these are the same, right? So we gotta be, if we're gonna be Merry and Pippin, gotta be halfling. All right, background. I chose charlatan. The most important thing here is that you choose a background that boosts your dexterity and your constitution. So charlatan qualifies, and we definitely want sleight of hand from this. But you actually get 4 skills as a rogue. So if you choose a background that doesn't give you sleight of hand, that's fine. You see where I put acrobatics in yellow? Just switch that one to sleight of hand. Okay, so you can get everything you need from just your rogue class, base class skills, and then get whatever from your background. That's fine. Okay, and charlatan also gives us. No, wait, real quick. Charlatan is not necessarily how I would describe Merry, right? He bent the truth and was playful and deceptive in a lot of ways, but he wasn't really a charlatan. Okay, so don't think that the background you've chosen is your backstory or the absolute descriptor of your character. You can rename the name of any mechanical thing you've chosen for your character. You can rename that, right? You don't even have to call yourself a rogue. You can call yourself a trickster, a ne'er-do-well, a fun-loving guy. When you role play your character and tell people about your character in game, right? You do not have to call yourself a rogue, and you do not have to call yourself a charlatan. And neither of these things restrict your backstory. Okay, so Merry's actual backstory was something more like a noble, because his father was the leader of the Shire, and I forget what they called that, but he was the leader of the Shire. And Merry was preparing himself to take over for his father. Okay, so he was like a prince in training. Okay, now the leaders for Shire were more functional, like you know, more functional like a mayor, right? So they're people who have skills that earn the position, as opposed to just being, an authority figure simply out of birthright. So he actually was in training to learn the skills necessary to take over for his father, which I think is why the skilled origin feat was appropriate, right? He actually was learning all these other skills, and that's why I chose history as one of them, right? That's like an important thing. History is an important thing for anybody who's going to run a group, I don't know, a small nation. What would you call the Shire? A city state? You're going to run it. You need to have a good amount of knowledge about history of the surrounding areas, the surrounding nations, the surrounding peoples, your own people. So that's why I chose that. And you want dexterity to be your highest score. That's the most important ability for the rogue, dexterity. So start at 17. You get that by going 15 with your um, point buy for your skills, for your abilities, and then +2 from your background. Constitution, you just want to, even though you're going skirmisher, if you get hit, you don't want to crumble, you don't want to fold. So get to 13 with your point buy for your ability scores, and then get a +1 from your background. That rounds up to 14, which leaves plenty of points left over. So we can get a 12 intelligence, a 12 wisdom, and 12 charisma. I feel like Mary is kind of balanced on the mental stats as opposed to like Pippin. So Mary is, you know, not as smart as Gandalf, but he's a decently smart fellow. He figures things out. He's got a decent wisdom. He reads people well. He understands people's emotions and their body language, I think, a lot better than Pippin. So we're going to give him a 12 wisdom, and that's also why I gave him insight. And then charisma of 12, he is decent at persuading. He's persuasive. He makes good arguments about trying to, usually when he's trying to corral Pippin. And that's also why I gave him the persuasion skill, which is going to make those things combined, is going to make him pretty good as a face of the party. Now, he's not going to be the best at being the face, but it's always good to be able to contribute. Okay, so he's going to be a solid contributor as a face in the face role. Okay, level 3, and then we had 1 point left over. So throw it in strength, because strength is the only ability score where you get any benefit from the odd numbers. Only strength. And the only thing that benefits you is you get a slightly increased carrying capacity. All right. Level 3. We're going to choose Thief for our subclass, because I think that's most appropriate for him. He was not an assassin. He was not psionic. And he was not a spellcaster. So Thief, but I also think Thief is just very thematic for Merry, right? They did steal things regularly. Hobbits were known as thieves. In the we call it basic now, which was all the versions of D&D before first edition AD&D, which came out in the early 80s, right? That's what we call the first edition, but that's actually the first edition of advanced D&D. Before that was basic D&D, which wasn't called basic, it was just called D&D. In that version, there wasn't species and class. There was just class, and halfling, or the very first version, hobbit was your class. And they were just a thief. Okay, so thief is the default for halflings and hobbits from the lore, okay? All right, level 4, we're going to choose Piercer. It's going to let us round up our dexterity to 18. That's going to take our dexterity modifier from a +3 to a +4. That's great. It gives us a +1 to hit. We do +1 damage. It gives us +1 on all of our dexterity-related ability checks, like sleight of hand, stealth, acrobatics. Okay. It also adds a bit of damage, which is nice. Okay. It's easy to use. It's simple and straightforward. There's no extra complexity to really remember and keep track of. It just helps you with damage. So this is a very straightforward, practical build. Easy to use. Okay. All right, let me explain some of the abilities you're getting along the way. Okay, first up, sneak attack at level 1. This is the premier ability feature of rogues. This is where you get most of your damage from, and it's great, a lot of fun. Okay, so how does it work? At every odd level, you do 1d6 more sneak attack damage. So at level 1, it's going to be 1d6. At level 3, it increases to 2d6. You can only trigger it once per turn, not once per round. So you could, if you get a reaction attack, use it on an enemy's turn as well. So that'd be twice. It's a little harder to do. So let's just focus on the one you get for your round. Okay, once per turn. And you either have to have advantage on the roll or one of your allies has to be adjacent to the person you're attacking. And that kind of represents like they're distracted by your ally and you're taking advantage of that to sneak attack, stab them in the back or something, right? Get them in the ribs. You can't have disadvantage. So disadvantage, even if you have an ally next to him, if you have disadvantage, that precludes sneak attack. You just can't do it, okay? And the ally can't be incapacitated. So if they're knocked out, they're not helping. They're not a distraction, okay? So keep that in mind. They've got to be a distraction. And you have to do it with either a weapon, a melee weapon with a finesse property, which is a short sword, a dagger, things like that, or it has to be a ranged weapon, okay? And as long as you meet those qualifications, sneak attack triggers, and you're going to do extra damage. You're going to do it once per turn, so it doesn't matter if you get a bunch of attacks. It doesn't matter if you're using two weapons. You just want to make sure you hit with at least one of them to trigger sneak attack. That's where most of your damage comes from. So we're going to do two weapon fighting here with Mary. We're going to use a short sword and a dagger, and the only reason we're using both of them is just to give us another chance to hit with an attack so we can trigger sneak attack. Because if you only make one attack and miss, that's it. No sneak attack damage, and that's most of your damage. Okay. All right. Next, so these are important. These are your weapon masteries, and the reason why they're important is to be more self-sufficient as a rogue. Okay. So let's say that there's an enemy who's over there. None of your allies are nearby. You don't have a ranged weapon. You're going to run over there and attack them, and you still want to get sneak attack. Well, you don't have an ally next to him, so that's not going to help. That doesn't give you sneak attack. So you need to get advantage somehow. All right. So you're going to attack first with your short sword that has the Vex property. And what that means is whenever you hit with a weapon that has Vex and you have the mastery, which we do, then your next attack against that same creature before the end of your next turn has advantage. Well, we're now going to take advantage of the nick property of the dagger, which we have that mastery too, which says if you make the attack you get from the light weapon property becomes part of your attack action if you have the nick mastery, okay? So the dagger is light. It has the light weapon property. It allows you to make that like one extra attack per turn on your turn. And because we have nick, it's now happening as part of our action, which means our bonus action is still free, which we want because we're going to use disengage every time, right? We want to disengage every time. That allows us to run up, stab, run away. So what does that mean? We can run up to the guy who's over there by themselves, no allies around, attack with our short sword. If it hits, we now have advantage. Now we're going to try to stab him with our dagger with advantage, which means we got sneak attack. We just triggered sneak attack on our own. Now we're going to disengage as our bonus action, run away, and run back behind the frontliners. Okay, so we're not exposed. All right, which feels like how the hobbits fought in Lord of the Rings, right? Run in, stab, stab, get out of there before they turn and face you. And the last set of features I want to go over are the features we get from our species, which is Halfling, Hobbit. You have Brave, which gives you advantage on saving throws versus the Frightened condition, or to end it. We have Halfling Nimbleness. You can move through the space of any creature that is a size larger than you, but you can't stop in the same space. Okay. Luck, whenever you roll a 1 on a d20, for any d20 test, which is ability checks, attack rolls, and saving throws, you can re-roll it once, and then you use the new roll. I do think it's interesting that says you must use the new roll. I mean, you got a 1 the first time. It can't get worse. So anyway, you must use the new roll, and you only get to do that once for each d20 test, right? But not once per turn. So if you make an ability check, an attack roll, and a saving throw all in the same turn, you can and get a 1 on all three of those, which would be horrible. But maybe you're I've seen it. You can re-roll each one. Okay? But you only get to re-roll once per check. All right. Our last feature, naturally stealthy. You can take the hide action even when you are obscured only by a creature that is at least one size larger than you. All right. Most of the time, when people take Halfling as their species, they're focusing on that luck feature, which is a solid, good one. It's really good. Now, rolling a 1 on an ability check and a saving throw have no special meaning. Those are not auto fails. Okay? Rolling a 1 only means auto fail if it's an attack roll. That's rules as written. If they're doing anything else, you're not playing rules as written. Okay? That's rules as written. But being able to re-roll those is still quite beneficial. Okay? Because it happens 5% of the time, unless you're somebody like Will Wheaton, and it happens more. And I've got one of my players who just rolls way more natural ones than anyone else. And And the ability to just re-roll a 1 on an attack roll, because that would be an automatic miss. Sometimes your modifier is so high that you can't miss, okay? Unless you roll a 1, because a 1 is a miss no matter what your modifier is, okay? But in those scenarios, the halfling basically can't miss. Yes, you have instead of a 5% chance of missing, you could roll 1 again, which means it's a 1 in 400 chance of missing instead of a 1 in 20 chance of missing, which can happen, very rare, okay? So you have virtually, if your attack modifier is high enough, you have virtually no chance to miss. All right. So that's usually what people are focusing on when they choose halfling. Maybe they're thinking about brave and they're like, oh, okay, cool. Fighting condition happens pretty often. I have never seen anyone ever use halfling nimbleness or naturally stealthy. And these things are bangers. So don't skip them, okay? These are cool. Cool abilities, very useful, and we're going to leverage them with this character. So, to talk about naturally stealthy, we got to get into some stealth rules. This is why I had to do the stealth video yesterday before I did this one. Otherwise, this would have been a gigantic video. Okay, so just remember, if you haven't seen that one, I'll link a card. And if I forget, somebody let me know that I forgot to link the card. I'll link the card here to the stealth video. Go watch that one because this is going to build on that. Okay, here we go. Your halfling feature that naturally stealthy, this is how it works. Okay, the standard rules for being able to, and that enable you to be able to take the hide action, because there's rules for enabling the hide action, then there's different rules for maintaining the hidden state, okay? And I went over that in the stealth video. I'm not going to cover that again. But the rule for enabling the hidden state, or sorry, enabling the hide action are on the left. That's the standard, what I call the standard rules. And they are, and I reformatted it a little bit, but because of the transitive property, you didn't know you're going to get a math lesson today. Because of the transitive property, I flattened that to make it a little easier to read, mechanically identical, okay? So you need one of these three conditions first, 1, 2, and 3. So you either need to be heavily obscured, or behind 3/4 cover, or behind total cover. You need one of those three, okay? And you have to be out of any enemy's line of sight. No enemy can have line of sight on you. Okay, that's the standard conditions to enable you to take the hide action. The halfling naturally stealthy ability says you can take the hide action even when you are obscured only by a creature that is at least one size larger than you. And I think a lot of us, myself included, for many years, in my mind, made me think this, because it says obscure, is replacing only that clause about heavily obscured. But that is not correct. This is replacing the entire block of conditions required to enable stealth. Okay, so if you're a halfling, you don't need to do that at all. You can just be standing behind one of your allies who's at least a medium-sized creature because you're small, and you can stealth, or you can take the hide action. Okay, it's now enabled. And as a rogue, you can do it as a bonus action. Okay, it doesn't change whether you're doing that as an action or bonus action. That comes from your class. This just changes the conditions under which it's enabled. All right, boom. It replaces all of those requirements. I think we do get tripped up on that word obscured, right? And so I went and was researching obscured, and what does it mean to be obscured? Because they don't say lightly obscured or heavily obscured, which is the rules reference, right? When you're referencing a specific rule, it's the lightly obscured or heavily obscured, okay? Which is shown here. I think this is the only place that says just obscured. And so what does that mean? I don't know. This is a little bit of DM interpretation as to what that means, but if you can see under the description where it says a lightly obscured area, such as an area with dim light, patchy fog, or more moderate foliage, then it's lightly obscured, okay? And that's still a little bit nebulous, so let's look at the heavily obscured to just have a comparison and contrast, something to contrast against. Heavily obscured areas are areas with darkness, heavy fog, or dense foliage, and is opaque, okay? So we're not changing, if you're obscured by a creature, that's not changing the lighting. So let's compare it to the part about foliage, because foliage doesn't change lighting. Foliage is just something kind of in the way, right? So lightly obscured means moderate foliage, like there's some leaves and branches in front of you, but you can still be seen. Heavily obscured or dense foliage is opaque, meaning there's so many branches and leaves, they can't see you at all. It is fully opaque. Okay, so that's what heavily obscured means. And a creature standing between you and the enemy trying to see you would certainly block some sight, not all of it, but block some of the sight, the visual lines of sight, like a moderate foliage. Okay. Now it doesn't even say lightly obscured, so that opens up this interpretation to 1% obscured, right? Because you don't have to even qualify for lightly obscured, which is moderate, which is still just kind of a interpretation of what does moderate mean. It could be minimal foliage, right? Minimal obscurement would still count as obscured. So how much does that creature have to be in front of you? That's open for the DM interpretation. So as you can see in this scenario, Shiz has gone sideways in the most colossal way. Okay, somehow these bad guys have gotten between you and your front line. It's just you, the thief, and the blaster, I don't know, Gandalf, in this room stuck behind the monsters, all right? This is a mess. And in most situations, you're kind of in trouble, all right? Because the blaster doesn't want to stand next to that goblin, and if nobody stands next to it, you can't get sneak attack from an ally next to him. Your only chance to try to get sneak attack now is you got to hope to hit with that short sword, and then you get Vex for advantage with your dagger, right? But you're a halfling, yeah, right? You're merry, which means you have halfling nimbleness. Yes, halfling nimbleness. That's the one that lets you move through other enemy spaces. And they only have to be one size larger than you. Okay. Bugbears are medium sized. So you got two bugbears in the way here. You're going to disengage so you don't trigger opportunity attacks, and you can move through their space because you are small sized and they are medium sized. Okay. And now when you move through an enemy space, it's difficult terrain. So that's going to take 10 feet of movement, 20 feet of movement. Allies are not difficult terrain. So you're like, hey, buddy, high five them as you're going past. That's 25, 30. You just ran right through all those guys, get right there. Yep, as a halfling, you can do that. And with our bonus action disengage, no opportunity attacks. You just ran right through. And what a great opportunity to describe it cinematically, right? You are tumbling between their legs. Maybe you attack as you go by. That's what I would probably do. Make your attacks before you get out of range. So you're like right here, attack this guy twice. Describe it as I tumble between his legs, I slash both of his hamstrings with my daggers, right? Hopefully you hit, and you can at least describe it like that. If you miss with both, maybe the DM describes them as just jumping over you. Okay, but then you end up over here. Boom. All right. Totally valid as a halfling. Okay. But now next turn, yeah, Gandalf is over there by himself, but that's fine because Gandalf is now just tanking a Balrog, as Gandalf does. He's okay. You're over here. It's the beginning of your next turn. These guys still haven't gone down. Your frontliners are here. Your ranged Legolas is like backed up. He's like, oh no, and shooting arrows. Beginning of your turn, we want to hide, right? To guarantee that we have advantage on our first attack and hopefully hit with that one and get advantage on our second attack too, right? So we can take the hide action because we are obscured by our allies who are medium sized, which is one size larger than us. That's naturally stealthy. Okay, that's how the halfling naturally stealthy works. So we don't have to run around the corner. We don't have to like run over here, try to hide and run back. We can just stand there and hide right there. Again, using cunning action to hide as our bonus action. So right there. And I don't think any DM could interpret this as anything but you are obscured by an ally who's one size larger, right? You are definitely obscured by an ally that is one size larger from every enemy. Okay? You qualify to hide right there. So you're going to hide right there. Then, I don't know, run over here, stab, sneak attack, finish this guy off. If you don't kill him, just walk away. Take a chance on the opportunity attack. If you do kill him, which you probably will, because you probably hit him on your first time through, this guy, and then your like frontliner hit him. This guy's pretty low, and you're going to hit him again with a sneak attack. He probably goes down. Then you just move back over here so that next turn you can do the same. Hide behind your allies, step out, stab, stab. Okay, this is turning out to be pretty long, but we're almost there, okay? Stick with me. Okay, so we got Piercer at level 4. A lot of people hate on this one and say it's not good. It's a solid DPR boost, okay? It's solid, it's easy to use, and for that I recommend it. When you are more comfortable with the game and you want to go for like a lot more complex options, go for it. But with this kind of a build, there's not a lot of ways to increase your damage straight up, okay? So Piercer's decent. It rounds up our dexterity. It lets us re-roll 1 die every time we attack with a piercing weapon. Sorry, once per turn when we deal damage with a piercing weapon, we can re-roll 1 of the dice. And if you roll a 1 or a 2 or a 3, you should probably re-roll 1 of those. The chances are that on the re-roll, the average damage you'll get from the re-roll is a 3.5 damage, which is slightly better than the 3. And that's because like if you rolled a 3 and then you re-roll it, you have a 50% chance of doing better damage and a 16% chance of rolling the same damage. It's only a 32% chance that you'll do less damage. So there's a greater chance that you'll at least do equal or more. So even if you got a 3 and that was the lowest roll, statistically, which we all know is magic and not real math, statistically, you would do better by re-rolling even a 3. Okay, but you only get to re-roll 1 die. Enhanced critical. So when you get a critical strike with a piercing weapon, you get to roll 1 more damage dice, which is a little bit more damage, right? Crits don't happen very often, but when they do, they're fun and exciting, and this increases the damage, so a little more fun and excitement. Solid feat. Okay, let's talk about your non-combat features. First off, you're like a B ranked face, B ranked in the face roll for the party. Okay, solid, not great. If somebody else might be better, that's fine. You're going to support them and do pretty well as the face. All right, Scout, you're A plus. You're probably the best in the party right now. Our other feature we have is Halfling Luck, which applies in non-combat situations, right? Ability checks and saving throws. And ability checks when you're not in combat should be saving throws are probably combat. Ability checks all the time, right? Should be all the time when you're out of combat. So and the Halfling Luck applies to that too, so that helps. Second story work, it's great. Climbing, jumping, getting places, scouting, awesome, right? We're going to be great at that. And at level 7, which I haven't included here, but at level 7 we get reliable talent. Reliable talent plus all these skills we have is going to make us an S tier face of the party and an S tier scout just because of reliable talent. Like we're just dominating those roles. So even if we weren't the best before, we're probably the best now. Okay. And by the way, at level 6, you get 2 more expertise. If you choose those in like skills that are, good for the face roll, like persuasion and insight, we're like S plus tier as the face, and we're S plus tier at the scout roll. Like we're just crushing those 2 rolls. So rogues are awesome for that. Also, don't forget about tool proficiencies. You're proficient in thieves tools, you're proficient in forgery kit, and perhaps, if you want, you can take one of your options from the skilled origin feat and choose additional tool proficiencies. I think a lot of people aren't aware of this yet, but if you are proficient in the skill that's relevant for the check and a tool that's relevant for the check, you get advantage. This is right out of the 2024 Player's Handbook. It says it right there. And even though I'm quoting it from the 2024 Player's Handbook, this has been in the game since Xanathar's Guide to Everything, which came out in 2017. Now, you could claim that was an expanded rule set and not core, and so you don't have to use it, whatever. And yet, I've never seen anybody use that explanation to ban Gloomstalker, right? Nobody's ever banned Gloomstalker. I see so many freaking Gloomstalkers. Gloomstalker everywhere, okay? It's like they pick and choose when they want to use this, like, oh, well, that's expanded rules. I don't have to use it. Okay, well, you're using expanded content from that same book. Gloomstalker came out in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. So did this rule. Why aren't you using it? And this is one of those things that takes tools from being pointless to something that really makes a difference. And again, I'm going to reiterate, anytime you can make something that is on the player's character sheet that they chose, anytime you can make it mean something, that's great, right? Even if it's a tool proficiency. Make tool proficiencies worthwhile. This is one way to do it. And here's an example, again, quoting, this one's out of Xanathar's. So Xanathar's went down the list of every single tool in the game and said, here's some examples of where this tool applies to this skill check. So this is the Carpenter's tools, and it's telling you it applies to the history skill in these scenarios, the investigation skill in these scenarios, the perception skill in these scenarios, and the stealth skill in these scenarios. Which means if we are, and if you read the stealth one, right, you can quickly assess the weak spots on a wooden floor, making it easier to avoid the places that creak and groan when stepped on. So Carpenter's tools apply to the stealth skill when you're walking on a wooden floor. What does that mean? The tool proficiency rule right there says if you are proficient in one of the tool or the skill, then you still get your proficiency. So if you a proficiency bonus added to the roll. So if you are not proficient in the stealth skill, but you are proficient with carpenter tools and you are trying to stealth across a wooden floor, you still get your proficiency bonus added to the roll from carpenter's tools. But if you are proficient with the stealth skill and carpenter's tools, not only do you get your proficiency bonus, but you now roll with advantage. Yes, carpenter's tools helps you stealth. You get advantage on wooden floors if you're proficient in stealth and carpenter's tools. Okay. And Xanathar's Guide, I mean, I don't know how many people have read this part of it. It goes down every single tool and does this. And I'm not even showing everything for the carpenter's tools. There's more stuff. Okay. So DMs, if you haven't read this, go look at it. Make sure you're applying this for your characters. Players, go look at it because the DM, it's not reasonable for the DM to go, oh yes, by the way, on this check, these 25 tools apply. Like that's not reasonable for the DM to name those all off. So players, you need to know this too, right? And your DM will probably appreciate it if you're like, oh, hey, by the way, I'm proficient because the DM doesn't have everything on your character sheet memorized. I mean, I'm pretty good, but I don't have everything memorized in every one of my character sheets. So help your DM out by saying, hey, I am, by the way, proficient in stealth and carpenter's tools, and you said this was a wooden floor. So according to these rules, I should have advantage. And if the DM's like, what? I've never heard of that. You can show them these rules, and be like, this is where it is. Don't be a jerk. Like I said, don't be a jerk to the DM, but say, well, these are the rules. Is that? And the DM's like, they'll probably be like, oh, I didn't know. Cool, great, you have advantage. Which would be awesome because how many times have you been able to leverage carpenter's tools in the game? Probably never. And it should be applied in these situations. All right, key combat features. Our primary combat features are sneak attack, weapon mastery, cunning action for disengage, piercer, and the halfling luck feature. And all of these things just happen by our basic combat loop, which I'm going to go over next. Okay. So you don't have to think about weapon mastery. It just happens as part of your combat loop, for example. All right. Our secondary key combat features are cunning action for dash and hide, or I didn't put this on there, but utilize, because you're a thief rogue, so you can utilize something, which means you can throw down some caltrops or ball bearings as your bonus action. You can set a hunter's trap as your bonus action, things like that. Okay, so maybe utilize. Steady aim, which means you can't move, but now you could like shoot at somebody with advantage. Fast hands, which is, sorry, that's what I was referencing for the utilize action. Fast hands is what lets you do the utilize action. And then second story work, which is going to allow you to climb faster. So whenever you're on a map that has multiple levels and you have to climb ladders or trees or whatever to get to those different levels, you have a climbing speed now and you have improved jumping. So you're going to do better in those scenarios too. All right, here's our basic combat loop. As our action, we're going to move, stab with short sword. That's going to trigger Vex. Hopefully we hit if we get it, and that triggers Vex. Then we're going to try to stab with our dagger because and hopefully we'll have advantage of that with that from from Vex, and we get to still do that as part of our action because of Nick. And the first time we hit on either one of those, trigger your sneak attack. Okay, if you have an ally on your first attack and when you don't have advantage, then you still trigger sneak attack right then. If you don't have an ally nearby and you get advantage with your dagger from Vex, therefore you can trigger sneak attack, do that. Okay, you want to trigger sneak attack on the very first time you can. You don't want to wait. There's no reason to wait because the damage is the same. And if you wait, you might miss with that second attack you were hoping to hit with, and now you get no sneak attack. Okay, so sneak attack very first time you hit when it qualifies for sneak attack. And just a couple of asterisks there. So remember to re-roll any ones or twos you get. Any one of your ones or twos that you get, maybe a 3 if you're feeling lucky, because that's from Piercer. And then also remember to re-roll any nat 1s you get because that's from Halfling. Okay, so if you attack and get a nat 1, re-roll it because you're Halfling. And in our bonus action, we're going to use cunning action to disengage and run away, get behind our allies, or go around corners to not be targeted, right? That's your basic combat loop. You're just going to do that all the time, okay? When you feel comfortable with that, and you feel comfortable with this character, or maybe even starting to get a little bored with that, just doing that same thing over and over again, you can start mixing and matching different of those different secondary key combat options that I put in the previous slide, where you're using maybe hide instead, and you're hiding behind allies to run out and attack with advantage on your first attack, or you're dashing to get somewhere else faster, or you're using utilize to throw down some caltrops or a hunting trap. Yeah, when you start feeling comfortable, start mixing in some of that other stuff for variety and getting good with that, because those things can be quite helpful. It's just this is the easiest basic combat loop. Okay, so don't think that you're restricted to this. Just think that this is, till you're comfortable with character, this is where you start. And finally, let's do some DPR comparisons. Okay, so I've got a rogue assassin here. I did the DPR calculations. I haven't done a video on this build yet, but I'm going to. I just wanted to show it for comparison. Then we've got Mary, our rogue thief, using disengage and has the piercer. Then I have a rogue thief who is the exact same build, but just didn't get piercer. They chose something else. They still have an 18 dexterity, and they just chose something else that doesn't boost their offense. Maybe they got defensive duelist, right, which really helps with defense, but does nothing for offense. Unless you say that, if you're dead, you're doing no offense, right? But anyway, that's beside the point. And then this is the fourth level version of the Whispers Bard build that I did. They were called Sorin or Morana. Okay, so I just want to be able to compare these and show you where you sit in between. And I also did that rogue, the secondary rogue thief with disengage, who didn't get the piercer feat, because I want to show how much piercer is helping you. Okay, all right. So naturally, the assassin rogue is first, right? 17.6 DPR. I'm not going to go through how I calculated all that damage. But they're winning at 17.6. Then the Whispers Bard is coming in at second place at 14.42. Now Mary is coming in at 13.29. I said that if you can get to like 12 DPR, you're doing just fine as a skirmisher, and we're a little over 12, so we're doing just fine, right? You might think that this is a very basic build, very vanilla. You're just a rogue thief. That's okay, right? If you're having fun, it's fine, and you're doing good enough damage to be just fine as a skirmisher, okay? And that was the main point I wanted to drive there. 13.29, you're doing great. Now, if you look at the next rogue down who didn't get piercer, they're doing 11.57, and the only difference is piercer. So piercer is increasing your damage, your DPR, by 14.8. That's a rounded up to 15% damage increase from piercer. So it is pretty good. It is hard to get that much of a damage increase from just choosing one feat, okay? Now it doesn't scale, right? As you get to higher levels and your damage keeps increasing, the DPR the DPR for piercer is flat. It's not going to be a 15% increase as your damage scales. It's going to always be that roughly 1.75 DPR increase. So even when you're at high level and your DPR is 20 or 30, it's still going to be a 1.75 DPR increase, not a 15%. So at low levels helps you a lot, and at higher levels less, which is probably why people are like, nah, it's not good. You know what? It's fine. It's fine. Okay. All right. So Mary's damage. Let's walk through it. You can see the short sword damage is 1d6 plus 4 because your dexterity is 18. So the base die is a 1d6. The average damage for a d6 is 3.5. Your mod damage modifier is 4 from your dexterity. The average of that is 3.5 plus 4. That gives you a 7.5. How often are you going to make this attack? You're going to make this attack every round, right? Every time on your turn, you're going to make this attack. Okay. Which means, the damage times how often you're doing this is still 7.5. What is your chance to hit? 60%. Which when you do those calculations plus factoring in your crit rate and crit damage, and the crit damage is boosted by piercer, that gives you a 4.85 average DPR from just that attack. Okay. But then we have our dagger, our nick attack. It's going to do 1d4 damage because that's the base damage of a dagger. The average damage for 1d4 is 2.5, and we're not going to add any modifier to the damage because we don't have the 2-weapon fighting style. And a lot of people forget that. If you don't have the 2-weapon fighting style, then you do not add your ability score modifier to the damage of it. You still add your ability score modifier to the attack roll, but not the damage. So that means the average damage, we're going to make that attack every round as well. Our average damage from that attack is 2.5 if we were to always hit, but we don't. I'm calculating the chance to hit at 80%, really counting on that Vex landing or you getting advantage from some other source like hiding, perhaps. And I think that's fair to say that it's going to average out at maybe an 80% on at least one of your attacks, or advantage on at least one of your attacks. So that one's going to hit. It's going to have a slightly boosted crit damage if it hits as well from Piercer. And that puts its average damage, average DPR at 2.5. Then we have Sneak Attack, which at level 4 is 2d6. It has no modifier, so it's just straight 7. How often are we making that attack? So I just figured 2/3 of the time you're going to hit. It's probably you're going to hit with at least something that qualifies for a sneak attack, which is probably a little low. It's probably more like 75 or 80% of the time you're going to be able to land your sneak attack if you're using these tactics. So, but I said 67% of the time, which means the average or the damage if we always hit every time we're able to make a sneak attack is 4.67. But we have a 92% chance to hit with it when it is activated, because between the two attacks, one not having advantage, one having advantage, it gives us a 92% chance to hit. That means the damage plus the crit rate of sneak attack is 4.64 DPR. And then we have the Piercer, and this is just the reroll portion of Piercer, which comes out to 1.63 damage, factoring in chance to hit. And that gives us 1.3 DPR coming in from the Piercer reroll. Okay, just the reroll. So you add all that up, that gives us the 13.29. That puts us sitting comfortably in range of what I said you'd want to get to be good enough as a skirmisher. And yeah, you got a solid build here, and he's going to be a lot of fun to play. Don't forget to role play him as Mary, and make some funny jokes, and stab guys in the thighs as you roll under their legs. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you next time.